hopefully when you call founders in our portfolio, they say that we show up when it matters. And I think I rather take that than any other compliment, you know?
What's the defining characteristic of being a founder, since you've done that multiple times and you've backed many successful founders? What for you is the code?
Persistence.
Every small business owner that I've met in some capacity, whether it's getting a haircut, going to a store, I've asked them what they think of the Anthropic small business thing that came out, and they have no idea what I'm talking about.
Every small business should have a license to Codex and Cloud and
absolutely.
Like everyone should. And I'm evangelizing that constantly.
What's your advice for the networkless founder who's tuning in from a different part of the world?
Oh man, look, well, move to San Francisco if you can.
Adi, thanks for being on the Catapult Code.
Thank you for having me.
Being an outsider as a superpower, great over pedigree, that money and mission don't have to collide, and the next orbit for Base10. Excited to talk about many of these topics today.
Thank you.
And maybe we'll start with that. How did the notion of, how do you explain the notion of being an outsider, giving freedom, and being a superpower? Maybe we'll start with the origin story.
I think that I don't necessarily think that being an outsider begins as superpower. It is more like a fact, like hey, I don't really fit in perfectly with any of the groups around me. I think that is an experience that we all go through, but maybe in my case it was a little bit more factually true because where I grew up. But I think I was lucky to have people around me, and particularly my mom, that is push on that. As like, so what? Like, that's actually making you quite interesting. I'm like, okay, I like that. I like that option better than the opposite. And I do think that actually, once you embrace that authentically, that is, quite interesting to other people. And for me, probably the rest of my career flows from there.
I want to double click on that one word you used, authentically. And what do you mean by that? Can you expand? Like, what does it mean to authentically embrace that?
I think, I don't know how to describe it very well, but I think it's a kind of thing that you immediately know when you see it or when you hear it. And I think what it comes down to is, hey, we're all in, this journey of figuring out who we are, which we kind of perfectly know as kids. And then we spend the rest of our lives going back there. And I think the more people feel like, oh, this person is saying things or acting in accordance to whatever originally made them go on this path with whatever that inner child happens to be, the better it feels internally and externally. And I think we recognize it in each other, and we are attracted to that because we're all going towards that journey. So whatever that feels like or whatever that is, that's what I mean. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they're both pretty authentic, as all kids are. But somehow, most of us lose a part of that as we grow up.
So what's interesting is the frame of being an outsider was, and figuring out that being an advantage was also rooted in figuring out that it's what makes you unique.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not looking at that as a negative. So pretty early on, you started to establish this personal compass. I would imagine some of the values. How did that bring you into entrepreneurship as a first step?
Yeah, I think for me, technology came before entrepreneurship. And I don't know exactly why, but I guess there are a couple of things. One, I was definitely the kind of kid that was naturally introverted, shy, and clumsy. And I think all the combination of those three things maybe the kind of kid that is more comfortable, maybe like reading things on their own, or like playing in their own little imaginary world, rather than, being the loudest in the playground. So I think that was part of the path. But then I immediately just like really resonated with all things technology, science fiction, science, etc. And obviously, the history of technology is a history of innovation. So those go hand in hand. And I did not know exactly how I was going to try and be part of that. But as long as I can remember, that was kind of what I was attracted to, and the role models I was attracted to, and what I wanted to, be part of in some shape or form.
Yeah. So you're getting pulled into what's next. You weren't saying, this is who I wanted to be. It's more of this is what you had a genuine interest in, and then that would fester into the next thing, or lead you to the next thing.
And how did you get pulled into your first startup and beating Facebook or Google at their own game in any market and stuff? So
I think that if I have to go way back to, when I started getting an interest in computers and coding, and that was sometime in middle school, sometime when I was like 11, 12, 13. And, that was in southern Spain in the 90s. That was not a very popular or supported undertaking. I'll put it that way. But it definitely came in handy in college when Ace went together with a couple of friends. We decided to start what became the Spanish equivalent of Facebook, Tuenti. And I think at that point, I was already like pretty set on that my path towards participating in the history of technology was going to be through the combination of innovation, technology, and business, whatever that meant. And I was definitely looking for, hey, I'm about to graduate college, and I literally don't like anything of what I have tried in the past. And I know what the end path looks like in my ideal imagination. I have no idea where it begins. And somehow, in the midst of all that, I saw around my peer group something that was what we now call social networks, but at the time really had no name. That was as clear of a product market fit as I think any of us have experienced in our lifetimes. Yeah. So right place, right time, with the right, a moment in life and technology priors, I guess.
And you've talked about, and you've done this multiple times over later in the journey, being co-founder and others, and then making the switch to investing. But where, what's the defining characteristic of being a founder? Since you've done that multiple times and you've backed many successful founders, what for you is the core?
Persistence. If I have to come with number one is, companies are about solving problems, and the best companies become the best problem-solving machines. And as a founder, you have to solve the problems of the company, or create them, depending on the day, right? Or both, most of the time. And I think that only comes with the feedback loop of, okay, we fix this now. All these things are broken. How do we focus on those until the end?
And from an investing lens, Adi, how do you judge that in a founder that's pitching to you?
I think is obviously super hard, and I would say that my observation is that founders nowadays are significantly more prepared for that journey, definitely than I was. But I think that our cohort and our generation, it keeps getting better, which is fantastic for humanity. But I would say that you want some sort of combination of extreme enthusiasm, because that is the fuel, right, that you need for the journey, with extreme resilience, that like, you don't know at the beginning of the journey, but ideally you fish from in, some kind of like past experience, but they go hand in hand. And then obviously some level of naivete, which is easier to find in first time founders, although you do see second time founders when like, no, this time I'm making no mistakes because I already know, which is obviously never the case.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I started my business after turning 40 with two co-founders who were also over 40, and our shared value and one consistent feature which was important to all of us was pain tolerance. I mean, we were not founders before, but we had seen enough of entrepreneurship ourselves in our each of our journey that there was enough pain tolerance, and that's
I think it's extremely important.
Yeah.
I'm curious about moments that might have been even defining moments of having that resilience, being counted out in some respects, right? You have a thesis, you're trying to get the feedback loop going, that wall that we all come to know as founders. Are there particular moments you can think of in different parts of your journey where you're running on fumes, I guess you could say, or things were running a little thin, and then how you push through that?
I think I can think of multiple, and I'm now 43. I started at 20 at 22, so I have 21 years of being told no multiple times a year, all the time by people that you're always selling the story, right? And you are trying to convince people to join you, capital to fund you, clients to buy your product, like whatever combination, and you get told no from all. I think I remember almost every single no. Like I really do. Like they really stay with me, and there are a lot of them. But I would say that most recently, it was extremely hard to get Base10 off the ground. And we had hundreds of meetings in year one, and definitely dozens of meetings until we came to anything close to a soft yes of like, this might be something I want to invest in. And as we were talking about before we started, we initially pitched applied AI. And this was not that long ago. This was like 7 years ago. And we were told in no equivocal terms that applied AI was not a thing. And at best we're told, okay, this might be a thing that is niche. So call it something else. That is where automation came from. And they were like, okay, that sounds more reasonable. So yeah, I think
Where did the conviction come from for the thesis in the first place?
To me, it was inevitable. I kind of have this thing with some of the big ideas. And by the way, I'm wrong applying this criteria, but I do try to apply it where I'm like, okay, let's imagine the world like whatever 5 years from now, like, and with things that are like big and binary, like I don't know, in my career, like social networks or like AI, I'm like, it's like what is more likely, that a world where this is ubiquitous, or what needs to be true for this not to be the case? And generally, if the answer to the latter is like sticks and stones, basically, I mean, like, oh, for that not to be ubiquitous, it means that we are worrying about canned food and water supplies and a rifle. So I shouldn't plan for that anyway. So let's plan for the other part of the world. And that's how it felt.
Yeah.
And I guess, the first time I used anything resembling AI was like in the 90s, trying to write a chess program. And then, when we were in school, I was experimenting with early neural networks for the newsfeed of social networks, and then for recommendations around professional careers. And that became a company. And it was just so clear of like, okay, it's a when. And the more I got in touch in the first company I started in the US, we sold a lot to hospital systems. And the moment I got a glimpse of what the state of the art was in document processing there, I was like, okay, I have a hunch
Yeah, fax
that,
machines.
you know, we can do better than this.
Yeah.
So it seemed pretty clear. It's just the timing. No one gets the timing right because it's so multivariable, right? And that's, I think, where luck comes in.
And why do you think it was, with all of your track record, why do you think it was difficult to get Base10 off the ground? What is an unfashionable investment thesis? What was it?
I think it's a combination of things. I think that back in 2017, 2018, there weren't actually that many new emerging funds like every year. And there weren't as many venture funds overall as they have appeared in the last decade. And so that is like structurally hard. For anyone that I know, it's hard to get a venture fund off the ground, almost no matter what, even with like great pedigree. And I was an angel investor, but I had never worked in an institutional platform. So I had a lot of things to learn that I'm still learning. So yeah, combination of all those. And probably, I should have chosen automation earlier.
And what drove you to investing from operating? What was the switch?
Initially, I think it's very natural, right? And I think for all of us, we're curious and interested in other people and other founders. So it's a very curious way of being like, oh, I want to be a little part of that. And like, I love this conversation. I want to stay closer to this person. And then again, feedback loops, like the moment one goes well, you're like, oh, it's great. This is so easy. Like, why do they do that? Where, the founder does all the work. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is the unique use of carry, right? The donation, I think it's 50% that you're giving back. Can you share a little bit more about that and the idea behind it?
Yeah, it came very natural from the fact that we're like, hey, how do we talk about what we do? And how we talk about what we do is automation for a real economy. But also it's like, okay, what does that mean? And it's like, okay, helping solve problems for the 99%. It stands to reason that when you're like, okay, if that happens and we all benefit from it, wouldn't it be cool that part of that goes back into the feedback loop of fueling the 99% so they get to solve more problems? And we thought that it was a good idea. We talked to a few founders that thought it was a fantastic idea. And we're just very lucky to be in the position to be able to do that.
And I was going to talk about the new fund. So it looks like, $850 million, a sizable fund, as significantly larger than previous ones.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How has that conversation changed? It seems like, obviously AI is in vogue, but the thesis seems to be proving out quite well. But the scale that you're now looking at things and what you want to do going forward, what you see happening in the next 5 years and what you're trying to support, and that the system, the giving the carry back to the 99% and creating this virtuous cycle. Are you accelerating all these components with this capital and this new fund?
A few things. So, when I think about the size of the current fund, and that is 850 across both funds, if you told me 5 years ago that we'll be deploying that much capital, I'll be like, no way. I don't think automation for the real economy is niche, but it's also not that size of fund. Obviously, again, about timing being wrong, I was completely off. Like when I think about it bottoms up, it's like I might be the most optimistic person in my team because I'm a founder, but like 50% of companies I get to meet, I'm like, oh, I would love to invest in this person at first meeting because I'm just so excited about everything that is going on, and founders are so good. At the same time, competition is more brutal than ever. And that's why when we actually start doing work, we're like, okay, there are like, 75 unanswered questions here. And how do we choose and how do we pick? And that's why we're so research driven, and we try to like limit to the little corners that we think we understand a bit better. But in terms of, how much all the different components are accelerating, I think my answer will be that I think they will accelerate meaningfully. But, the factual answer will be, I'll tell you in a few years, as these things go, because we all know that we are definitely all in a moment of euphoria that feels positive, but backed by reality, but we don't know yet.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about the founders, the caliber going up. Can you describe what you're seeing in terms of caliber, and then also what you look for in a founder? Has that been consistent throughout since you started the first fund in 2018?
Yeah. Some things are timeless because, again, technology changes, but human nature does not, or at least not at the same rate. So, again, like the resilience, the optimism, like that just has to be there, or not. I will say that, when I got interested in coding in middle school, I took a couple of buses to the library that had the manual on COBOL and C++, and then took that back home and in the junky no hard drive computer, played around with this and that stuff. And if I was the same person today with the same resources, I would use ChatGPT and Claude and YouTube and follow Twitter accounts with a lot of knowledge. And, again, same person, same resources, same interested. By the time I was 18, I would know so much more.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of founders that we're seeing now. They just have a leapfrog of information and capability on us, which is fantastic. It's awesome. I, again, get to learn through them, which is great. The thing I would say is that when you take all that and the bar raises, interestingly, the result is that you actually care even more about the human qualities, because you're okay, so, every single one of these founders have 10 years of projects and courses, and you can go to their GitHub and everything's great. And which 8 years ago, if you saw a person just with those checks, you'll be oh, this is such high signal. Right. That, again, there are always some, and this person, by the way, also won 3 gold medals in mathematics. And you're okay, then maybe that's a higher signal. But absent that, I have found myself being more okay, out of these 10 companies who have met this week, who am I really looking forward to spending more time with? And just using that as a compass. And it might be right or it might be wrong in terms of what is the absolute best possible investment. But at the end of the day, it's also about enjoying the journey and you being the right investor for that founder. So I'm trying to follow that more. And again, I'll tell you how good of a decision that was in a few years.
Yeah. It's very consistent, though. I mean, I think that's one of my big takeaways from our conversation so far is just finding the sense of authenticity, but also this, and I've, in my own experience as a founder and then talking to a lot of founders, when you get pulled by the market on something, and it feels like you've really honed an instinct from that early on in your life and then trusted that in that process, and then coupled with the resilience of not, remembering all your no's as a driving force.
What is it that you would bring to the boardroom or to the founders advisory cohort that makes it different from being an operator before versus just a career VC, for example?
I think so. I should answer that as a firm, as an individual. What I always tell founders is like, hey, we have built a firm at Base10, or we're trying to build a firm that, by design, we're trying to have it be very complementary. Like, we're all very different individuals. We bring very different skill sets. And, we have, I have career business partners that can help companies in ways that I can't. Yesterday, me and my partner were both with two of the co-founders of one of our best companies, and he spent like 2 hours like pressure testing the data room, which he's like 0.1% analyzer of, in ways that it wouldn't even occur to me. And what I tell founders and what I try to bring is just all those hundreds and thousands of no's, and there are days that are going to, or there are hours of the day that are going to feel absolutely amazing, and there are hours of the day that are going to feel absolutely terrible. And you have to like be okay with that, and like, find yourself in that, and like balance it, and try to be proactive versus reactive about all that stuff. Just significantly easier said than done, as you both know. And I try to focus a lot on that. And I try to just focus a lot on the founder journey. And one of my partners says this, which I like a lot, which is like, hopefully when you call founders in our portfolio, they say that we show up when it matters. And I think there is very, I'd rather take that than any other compliment, because there are a few moments when it matters. And I definitely remember the people that showed up for me.
The red phone, I like to call it.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
And along the way, there's many hard decisions that you have to make. What are some of the, or maybe one or two examples of the hardest decisions someone had to make, and where a founder had to make, and how to guide the thinking process, or what you would do in that when a founder is going through that fork in the road? There's a big decision
I
to
think
make.
we all have them, and I mean, look, I think, gosh, I'm going to put aside all the ones that have definitely happened for me, unfortunately, that have to do with personal tragedy in the business. But aside of that, when you take the pure business context decisions, obviously the hardest one, shutting down the company, right? Which I've been at both sides of it, and then everything in between, like from like, a hard decision being like, oh, my round is oversubscribed and I need to say no to these two VCs I really like. Okay, well, that's hard. It's a different kind of hard that, hey, I have to tell my employees that I can't make payroll, which also in there, and it's not fun. And then this is the first time you let go someone. It's like the worst day ever. And then at some point it has to become a skill. And the other thing I would say is that, hey, I'm running a venture fund, which is a startup, but it's a very different kind of a startup than an actual startup. And part of that is the self-recognition that some of the things you need to get really good at to scale to a multi-thousand person organization, I actually I'm not very good at them, or have no interest in getting very good at them.
Can you tell me a little bit about the advancement initiative and with CodePath and I think Anthropic?
Yeah, it is all in the same concept of giving back to the 99%. And obviously, as you both know, carry when it comes is very meaningful, but it takes time. And one of the things that we thought is like, hey, in between, what are things that we can do every quarter, literally, to like keep advancing on that mission. And CodePath is an organization that we have admired for a while, and we have been now working with for multiple years. And what we try to do with them is like, hey, how can we pull our resources to help you guys in the mission of taking the latest of what's happening in Silicon Valley to students, particularly from underfunded colleges, and also giving them connectivity to organizations here where they can intern or work at, or just connect with the leadership. And we have done that with them and multiple, like Anthropic, OpenAI, Figma, Notion, like, et cetera, et cetera. And
Incredible.
we'll keep doing it, and it's super fun.
And is there a feedback loop on this? Have you found returns data showing a difference from underrepresented founders, for example?
I mean, I think at the short answer is yes, but I think at the highest level, and the one that is super obvious is like the amount of immigrant founders, which so much so that now is consensus, but a few years ago it wasn't. And yeah, I think we want a lot more of that generally.
I had a question about the use of proceeds. So in terms of historically, when you go and raise capital, a good majority of that is going to hiring talent. Then you can have your acquisition, go to market motion and all of that, but you're effectively investing in people. And now a good portion of that is going to compute.
Yeah.
So how do you, with this new fund, think about the allocation of that capital? Like, how much do you think that's actually going to go directly into compute? And what do you think the implications of that might be?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to clarify, you mean how much of the money that we invest in the startups they will use to compute versus...
If you cut a $20 million check, is that effectively 10 million to Anthropic?
Yeah.
And then are there implications to that you see in terms of how founders can be building businesses more effectively, or basically factoring that into their calculus?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I don't have a good numerical sense yet, because basically the way we think about it is like, hey, the world started anew 3 years ago and changed.
Yeah.
So, the most obvious numerical answer will be like, well, is that a good business model? And like, what do gross margin look like at a scale? No one knows, because the data is not there and it's not going to be there for a while. Some things that seem obvious are that, hey, turns out that when intelligence is not the bottleneck, or not as much the bottleneck, let's put it that way, particularly for product development, that can go a lot faster. We're seeing that across the board. Like, hey, if you are underwriting product roadmaps that look X, you can comfortably underwrite product roadmaps that look 25X with a third of the team. That's kind of consensus. Okay, so what else? We are also at a moment in which adoption of those products by the enterprise significantly faster. So you can also underwrite that, for the companies that are at the lead, they will grow a lot faster. So those things are like playing out. How sustainable that is for everyone? What does that mean for, are these companies actually going to like hire less people? Very unclear. Like very, very unclear. Like the biggest, fastest growing AI companies are hiring a ton of people. And definitely one thing I feel quite strongly about, that maybe not everyone in our field feels that strongly about, is that you're going to need a lot of people and a lot of companies in a lot of verticals to get to the last mile of AI adoption. Because I don't think it's a last mile. I think it's a last 50 miles from what happens in the lab to like actually running your organization.
What's an example of that in terms of what do you think where that the last 100 miles or what?
I'll give you a micro one and a macro if you wish one. But at Base10, we are 25 people. In the investment team, we're like 10 people. Of the 10 people, we all code in some shape or form, but the majority, quite a bit, a number of CS major, a number of people that have been coding since our teens, like whatever. We all use all the products and all the coding agents, like constantly, individually. We started building our own AI platform, Base11, in 2017. We hired head of data Robbie, who started the venture group on data that is the most popular one today with Sequoia and Greenox in 2019. And we use AI for like all of our workflows. So we should be like an easy organization to adopt AI. And it's pretty hard. Because of all the reasons of like, maintenance, adoption, all these breaks. Turns out this other person's using it differently. Context. It's mostly a race for context. If like context here, but we have a slightly different context, and then it breaks because it's not literal. So all that's being solved, but it's like pretty hard. And we are completely APL since before it was a thing. We're using a ton to make it a lot more productive. But it is hard and it needs a lot of context. So that's Base10.
Yeah.
Pick any public company.
Right.
Pick a company that, wasn't started less than 10 years ago, with the majority of the users being like AI native, with like,
and a culture that's not adopting, right?
And it's just very hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. And then, like, okay, forget about corporates, pick government. It's tough. I briefly made the motion in my household to use more AI automation and was severely shut down pretty quickly. And I think, there's a version of that for all society. So I think, some of the fears of automation are very real, and we should take them very seriously. And they're important conversations to have at every level. I would just say, let's not get ahead of ourselves on adoption end to end of these technologies.
Do you think there'll be indicators when the adoption's taking hold?
I think so. I just don't know exactly. I think it's always going to be a little bit ahead. And what I mean by that is like, up until I don't have this data as of like the last 9 months, but I'm pretty sure up until 9 months ago, maybe 12 months ago, still the majority of enterprise run work streams were still on premise versus on cloud. And I've had cloud for a while.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of what I'm seeing. Like I spend a lot of my week talking to large corporations around their AI workflows, because it's paramount to what we do, and across the board, like logistics, oil, financial, healthcare, law, like you take it at, I'm always talking to clients, and there is some real challenges. Everyone is putting a ton of resources into that, but I think in our best case scenarios, with the current technology, there is a lot that needs to happen for adoption to be what we imagine it to be and what we know it will get to.
Every small business owner that I've met in some capacity, whether it's getting a haircut, going to a store, I've asked them what they think of the Anthropic small business thing that came out, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah. And they're like, oh, is that the open AI thing? And so there's this education piece. And so the adoption, but having said that, and given the time horizon and how you think about funds and vintages, what are you most excited about in the physical AI world and for realizing this thesis in the next phase?
Well, I think you did my answer pretty well, because if you think about the obvious one, it's like, okay, that's a real gap, because to be clear, every small business should have a license to Codex and Claude and
absolutely.
Like everyone should. And I'm evangelizing that constantly. I'm like calling back home and being like, hey, you should really get into this. They're like, no, I am. I'm chatting with him. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
So if you yes that, that's like massive opportunity, massive opportunity. And all that needs to be built around to actually capture that context and maintenance and stuff. Like we could deploy many times our funds just on that over the next decade.
Just focus on small business.
If we were just focused on, we are investing like enterprise, small business, like everything, but just focus on like the gap between the current intelligence capabilities and the ability of the economy to absorb them.
Yeah.
Just that. And there's a lot of what we're investing at. But, you know, we have probably the greatest unlock of the last 5 years has been scaling, and how I was definitely on the camp that underestimated scaling. If you had told me, hey, if you plot compute and data and then skills, there is going to be like some line where you just like put more compute and data and more skills get unlocked. I'll be like, no, it doesn't make sense. That's not how the world works. That's not how intelligence works. Like language does not have enough context of the real world for that to be the case. And I was completely wrong. I was not in the minority there. I think a lot of us like underestimated that. And that's fantastic. That's wonderful. It is very clear though that in order to fully understand the world, you need other kind of models, like world models, which is a label for like a number of things. And, you know, part of that is going to unlock physical labor in like completely different ways. And that alone, like take that, like, hey, when will world models have their ChatGPT moment? I don't know, but that'll be mega gigantic. So things like that are the stuff that I'm like, man, I cannot even think of the implications of that. But yeah, no, that's like, you probably need you could like take all the entire VC industry today and like copy paste that just into that and what happens after that moment. And that's a whole other explosion. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And with all your experience across all these multiple countries, 30 plus countries, what's your advice for the networkless founder who's tuning in from a different part of the world?
Oh man, look, well, move to San Francisco if you can, but if not, it is just such a better time, you know, to be, we're truly all or most, not all, there's still a lot of work to do in that, but thankfully so much easier to get connected to the sources of knowledge for all the resources that we have talked about, right? Like even the Twitter, YouTube, LLMs, etc. So it's a lot easier to build, and that's great. Again, I built my first company on physical servers, which is, you know, try to talk to a current YC founder about that. They're like, how old are you exactly? You know? So it's super exciting. We and we're running towards the end, but I would say that if you zoom back to the first time we unlock our advanced initiative program, we talk about this concept of the world's brain, and that was our way of talking about the humanity's compute, if you wish. Like, hey, collectively, if we're a problem-solving world mind, what is our IQ? And you know, that is some combination of like all of the humans that are connected and that are able to have enough resources to actually compute. And like, if you do the math, it's like not that great, because there's a lot of people that, you know, we still need to connect and to give enough resources to give more compute. But all these things are helping. And I think that's what's really exciting. If you're like, oh, if you go back to the 1900s, definitely not that many people were connected to that world mind. And now there are a lot more. And all these advances seem to be taking us more and more in that direction. So that I'm super excited about.
The one thing I would close on is, I think this idea of, you know, I asked you in the beginning, you had this idea of who you are, this compass of how you navigate, and asked you for this path to being founder. You kind of arrived at that. You got pulled to that. I think in the same thing of, you have a thesis for physical AI, what the world looks like, at the same time, a complete openness to not mandating what that will actually be or when that's going to happen. And I think you do a very effective job of balancing those two things. So
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for the time today.
No,
Thank you for
thanks
your
to you
time.
guys. It's awesome. I
Yeah.
wish I could talk a lot
Yeah.
more.